Wow. Well, I have got the lovely Kristy Wood-Giles today. I'm delighted to welcome you, Kristy. And I just want to tell you a little bit about Kristy. She's a health and life coach, an author of the 2-week window, Living with Lyme and Thriving in Life. And you're a real advocate for nature and being a real positive impact on, mental and physical health. So let me ask you, tell me, because you mentioned this to me sort of a little while ago, that you were very fit, you were very healthy, and then you got Lyme disease through ticks, and that had a really, really detrimental impact on you, and you were told you could never, from being a real runner and very fit and healthy, you were told you'd never run again. So before we talk about your interest in how to support children, I just like to find out tell me your story about Lyme disease and what happened.
Okay, well, yes, I worked in park management for a couple of decades, and so was trained on the dangers of ticks and Lyme, and felt very competent to deal with it. I did, however, I also at the same time was also doing fitness courses and classes in parks and integrating the two worlds of nature and fitness, and was very passionate about it. And on a 300-kilometer solo hike, I was exposed to a lot of ticks, was very cautious, went for medical treatment after to be sure. And so obviously you can imagine then that as my health degraded over the next 3 years, they didn't tie it to that because everyone felt like it had been dealt with. But I had gone from running a half Ironman to actually having trouble walking down my own hallway in my house unassisted, to be able to have enough breath and energy to make it up a flight of stairs, and was really struggling to even keep my job, and just memory and cognitive issues. And it really, because it had gone for 3 years, affected every part of my body and my life. So it took me through a journey. It's been 9 years of looking for health and trying to discover all the things. Now, my background was natural health, so I incorporated a lot of those things, but it really took me to a deeper place of understanding our body, how we are naturally meant to thrive, and really just how powerful we are ourselves. And although I incorporated a lot of medical and natural health solutions, putting that all together with my own abilities and energy was the clincher to finding the health and life that I have now.
I'm really curious, because Lyme disease is such a weird one, and it's so powerful and devastating for anybody who gets it, and how that can happen just by little tiny ticks, I don't know. But how did it kind of impact you? What happened? How did you notice that there's something gone wrong?
Well, the nice little thing about the infection they give you, it's just a really slow progression. So you do fall under the radar easily, even for yourself. And even it's weird, because I remember one doctor saying to me, "Oh, you endurance athletes, you're so sensitive to all symptoms." And then I, would try, I'd sort of feel like I was becoming a bit of a hypochondriac. And that's the last thing I thought. I went on this solo hike to test my, mojo and see what I was capable of. And it pushed me to the edge. That's the kind of things I like to do. And the only thing that I feel very blessed about, and has given me a lot of compassion for other people struggling with anything health related, mind and body, is that I was lucky that I was sort of this crazy endurance adventurer, because people around me at least took me seriously when I couldn't physically get myself out of bed, because it does appear like a depression or a little bit emotional. They often kept saying to me, "Oh, you're just doing too much, it's stress," those kind of things. And so I was very lucky to have a great support system around me, but I doubted myself at times. So, it really is challenging with just wondering where you push and insist that you need more help, and where you try and do what you can for yourself. And I really think we all juggle with this in some form in life, of just, when do I need help, and when should I be helping myself more?
What did you do? How did you get yourself better? Because that's obviously the key, isn't it?
Well, it would probably take me hours to tell you all the things I tried, all the crazy places I traveled. I did have trouble with conventional medicines, although I did utilize those. But initially, the treatment protocol is so extreme for such a long period of time, my body just couldn't handle it. So I then incorporated a lot more kind of, I did things like hypothermia, where you put your body in situations where it's above 104 because that kills off the bacteria. And yeah, I couldn't list them all, but ironically, I recovered a lot of health, but where I still felt like I really struggled was energy. And as much as I was so grateful for getting my life back, it just felt like life was going to be still an effort. And that's really what took me to the, deeper parts of what is my body capable of? Where can I find its own ability to heal and find more energy, and all these things. And that's also what led me back to nature, which most people say, what, you went, you're back out there, you're an advocate for being out there. And of course, I promote a lot of safety protocols now to prevent ourselves from tick infection. But I am back out there because it really is a great resource for health and finding, your natural energy and that boosting power you have and all those kind of things. So a lot of that's really what took me the extra little mile to find the true health that I have discovered.
And did you find that nature, I mean, you'll have to tell me a little bit more about that. What actually got you your energy back, or haven't you got your energy back? I guess you have partially.
Yes. So I often say I'm sort of 90% there. At this point, it's hard to tell if it's the aging from how long the process has taken. But I'm still working on natural solutions that boost me a little bit. But a lot of your nervous system is really impacted because basically, if you think of it as the infection is everywhere. So it's like it's sending signals that it doesn't need to be. It's not receiving signals it should. So anxiety and heightened energy with extreme crashing are kind of parts of it. And so it was really curious to me that when I got outside, they talk about this grounding factor, and we use that term pretty loosely, but it really is an energetic factor that calms the nervous system. And so when I could do that for a certain period of time, my nervous system could actually relax enough that some of my body could work on the infection that was impacting it. So I really came across that from some of the treatments I did in the US. I'm in Canada. So in the US, because they actually used frequency and vibration to do that to your system. And I'm like, what? So I looked into it a little bit more, and I learned that, yeah, when we're in a natural environment that's similar to our body, it actually allows our body to get into that level of energy and relaxation and frequency that boosts your immune system. So, when you're and I may be going into this a little bit more than you want, but if you're in a stressed situation, those kind of primal processes are decreased, like our immune system. They're all stalled and paused to help you through the stress, but we all kind of live in a really chronic low-grade stress state. So that doesn't happen. So when we get out into nature, it signals to our body that stress isn't apparent.
Yeah.
And so we can relax and calm down. And your nervous system is very receptive to that because that energy is all around you, right? The plants emit it, the trees emit it, the ground, the soil. And so they're all emitting the same level of energy that kind of is encompassing your whole system. So it's a really great nervous system, decrease, calm, and then all of those other processes like our immune system, digestion, are all boosted. So it's pretty cool to know what it can do to help us.
I always find it amazing how simple the best techniques to support us are, so simple, and they're around us and they're free. I mean, I think one of my favorite things to do if I'm feeling that I really need to calm, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, is bare feet in the grass, leaning with my back against a tree, and paddling in salt water, seawater. It's like on the sand. It's just, those are the things that I can feel everything going, absolutely decompressing.
It's so true. And there's really a scientific component to why that is happening with all of them. And the interesting thing even about the tree is it's not just one thing. So that tree's energy, obviously with you touching it, is impacting you. But then there's also like terpenes and phytochemicals that it's releasing that really boosts your not only healing power, but boosts your whole system. But they even have some of the phytochemicals they talk about have infection fighting powers. So
Wow.
they fight off fungus and, viruses and these kind of things. So yeah, I really discovered that because in Canada, we have snow in the winter. And so my simple question was, how do I, on the ground in your bare feet, it's just like reflexology. That's where your body really absorbs energy but we're not doing that at -40 in the snow. So, well, I guess some people do, but so that going through the science, the next best source was to literally lean up against a tree.
Oh, really? Oh, really? How interesting. Yeah. Well, it's so funny, isn't it? Because I want to talk about children in a minute, but I just want to sort of relate what you say about grounding, because in my other life, which is as a musician and performance coach for classical musicians, one of the key things I do when they're nervous is to say, right, just this, I have this exercise that I call roots, which is, or I always want them to have one word so they can pull it up easily. And it's basically the very simple exercise of imagining you've got roots growing out of the bottom of your feet on the ground, and with nervous energy going jittering up your system, that's one way of getting it back down again. And it's so important, and it makes a huge difference to them. And this is, and if we take it to children, I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful if children knew that that was something that they could do and have as a resource, so that if they're feeling really stressed or upset or anxious, they could literally, obviously, as you say, don't want to do it in winter, but in summer, or just bare feet in the grass or back against a tree, and know that that's actually really doing something. It's not just sort of a flight of fancy. It really is real.
It is, and it's amazing with kids because they respond even faster in a shorter amount of time when they're exposed to those environments than as adults would. They're little sponges for everything that's going on around them. So people can really notice a change. And so even children that struggle with, well, especially anxiety, but even ADHD, just focusing, concentration, it's really maximized just by being outdoors. And it was interesting to me when I was still trying to work in recovery and I just couldn't focus for a very long period of time. I actually would try as much as I could to work outdoors. And people think that you're just saying, oh, it feels nicer to work outdoors, so that's probably why you enjoyed it more. But there was a strong function because I even had to watch my O2 saturation levels, and I could keep them up when I was outdoors. And then I would feel a sense of improved focus. I just literally could work longer. But even if because they had been monitoring it for so long, indoors, when I would do exercise trying to build up my capacity, it would always drop. If I did the same thing outdoors, it would stay. So now you're trying to build capacity, but you're improving that oxygen saturation all through your body, which is helping your mind relax. And it also decreases stress because your body is not feeling like it's struggling. So with the children, you just see this improved level of relaxation, this improved level of concentration, just by simply being out there. But I think it's not just, you know, the energy from the ground, or just the oxygen, or just the, you know, chemical influences. It's all of those things. It's kind of like a pressure cooker of good things for them.
Yeah. Oh, I know. And how crazy is it that that so many children have a big focus, and I would say addiction actually, to phones, laptops, iPads, all of the things that we have now in our society. But you were telling me about forest schools. I'd love to hear your thought about forest schools.
Well, we had outdoor programs, obviously, with all the parks that we had, and I have to give credit to one of the instructors, because she was very innovative. And
So let me stop you a second. Were you involved in being part of a forest school, or were you teaching at? Explain a little bit more about
well, I managed quite a few park areas, so I would work with the instructors on building the programs. And so outdoor programs are, we call them outdoor programs because they're kind of just consistent programs that they offer all the time, which would be schools coming by, or day programs, or, you know, weekend events. But she actually took the initiative to really build a strong forest school program where, and on different levels. For some people, it was just, they would take their child there for a day on a regular basis for schooling. And then some are building more into, you go there for school on a regular basis consistently. That is your school. Those ones are a little bit tougher, but becoming very popular every year, more popular every year, I should say, because people are starting to see the balance. One of the unique things they tried was actually incorporating the tech with the nature. And so it made for a great evolution for the children, and just in the way of having iPads that had identification keys on it, where you would go out and ID, you know, trees and plants and stuff through the iPad app, but then you would also do it, you know, the old traditional way with books and trying to see. And ironically, some will even find how much easier the more traditional ways would work for them.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
Yeah. So I think we have to work with the world we live in now too, and help them transition to remembering the value of, you know, the simple ways, the natural ways, really kind of where our body exists and is more comfortable. But we do live in a technical world, so it's nice when you can incorporate a bit of all of those.
So, I mean, I should have really asked this at the beginning. What is a forest school?
Well, and I think it can definitely differ by countries. It can even differ just by whoever's providing the program. But really what you're trying to do is take all the fundamentals of the curriculum. And originally our school programs would do this when a school or a class would come for a day. They always followed the curriculum requirements, because the teacher was looking for you to, you know, use your expertise and comfort in a natural area to teach this topic in a new way. And so forest school just really takes that to the level where you're touching on all the curriculum, but kind of in all the ways you can in nature, you know. So it's not just showing the one way that nature will be an example for this particular topic. You're trying to cover all learning opportunities in nature, hence, you know, the iPad versus the book and all these kind of things. So you're moving the learning experience outdoors. And when I even talked about, you know, my ability to focus and concentrate better by being outdoors, you have that advantage there, as well as all the learning opportunities, just nature itself. And it's the key, sorry, I'll just go into this a little. The key thing I think that I have learned, and I actually use it in a lot of things I teach, is when I can't, you know, sometimes it's hard with social media and marketing to really get an answer to a question. Like, for example, you know, what's the best technique to use while running? Well, I then apply it to nature, like to natural animals, and how they evolve and how they would do it without all the modern influences we have. Like, for example, really spongy, thick running shoes kind of thing. And so nature can actually hold the answers we're looking for to a question that seems really complex because there's so many different opinions, that if we just go to nature and say, how would this most naturally happen or exist, then that can be your first source of where you build a foundation for maybe what you believe or what you're going to build on to build a belief system.
You were talking about spongy running shoes, and I was just thinking about the people I've known in my life who have insisted on running barefoot, because I wonder, and they're passionate about it. I wonder, how much in our ancestors would have done that, and how, they would have obviously had much, much stronger soles of their feet. I mean, we're kind of soft as can be if we're sort of used to having shoes all the time. But I wonder what you get from that experience. And again, what would children get from that experience of running with bare feet if they learned to build up the soles of their feet so they're strong enough?
Well, good question, because I actually teach that. So, and I won't say I teach barefoot running. I teach what I call natural running, how your body was naturally meant to run. And it's really cool because when I watch the children, so I also would teach trail running, which children absolutely adore because it doesn't really feel like they're putting this consistent effort out. They're exploring and trying to hop over rocks and look for where they're going next. And so the running part is really natural. And interestingly enough, in a rougher area, they run more naturally as if they were barefoot, just, instinctively. And so when we run on flatter surfaces is when we tend to do it more unnaturally, and so I encourage people to move towards more minimal shoes, because you can't always just run barefoot. But what I did find over time is it actually had to be a slow progression for people, because you could have injuries. It changed the whole way your body sat and how the joints moved, because you're actually going from almost leaning back to moving a little more forward. But the one piece I always did was I would tell people, take off your shoes and your socks and hop up and down and tell me what part of your foot, and then try and do that with your heel hitting. Nobody can do it. Instinctively, we can't do it. So when we're running with these thick shoes that our heels are more likely to hit a little bit more, we're actually not using our body's natural ability to impact or absorb that impact with the ball of our foot. And wow. So we, anyway, without going into it a whole lot more, but yeah, it's interesting to see people do better, their knees absorb it better, but it has to be a slow progression because we've really changed how we lay out. But when I watch kids on the trails, they do it so instinctively. It's great.
Well, kids scamper, don't they? I mean, a sort of, if you leave a child on their own in a natural habitat, they'll scamper around, they'll look, they'll hide, they'll look at things, they don't want to do things formally, they don't want to run, they want to just have fun. I mean, yeah. That's their natural way of doing things. It's it's so lovely. I mean, do you have there been any sort of not official studies, but maybe I should ask you, have you personally seen a real change in children with some of these natural ways of learning?
Well, yeah, and I'll answer actually the question both ways, because there are numerous studies. They've done quite a few comparative studies, I mean, adults and children as well, but just even where seeing a natural view by measuring the brain waves, there was a 20% decrease by just looking at a natural view. And I think a lot of it has to be with that deep ingrained knowing that that's kind of where we belong, where we come from. And, it's funny, some people say to me, oh, I'm not very outdoorsy, but I'm like, but you are nature. We are nature. So there is a capacity for us to sort of feel like part of that is part of us, or we belong a little bit if we give it a chance. It doesn't mean you have to go on a 300-kilometer hike or, climb trees or dig in the dirt, but to expose yourself to there's something very innate where we know that that's kind of a part of us. I think a bit of it has to do with experiencing that energy that is the most calming, but there's just they measure the brain waves. They've seen decreases in anxiety and ADHD by consistent exposure on a daily basis. So it's something that builds over time, but you want to work on that. There's so many examples of people being able to actually heal themselves, and I think it's really because of the state we put ourselves into. I think where we miss the opportunity is for it to be a daily or habitual pattern that we create, because then our body gets more and more used to that state, and then we'll actually be able to bring itself there the more you expose yourself to it. So it's not like you can't only get there by being out in nature, but it's like any habit, right? You form a habit of your body feeling relaxed and in a health-inducing state. The more you do it, the more it'll want to do it for itself.
I mean, just on a very simple level, I find that if I go out for a walk at lunchtime, just even 20 minutes, and just look at the trees and sort of, it's everything you were saying about that calm. It's just so calming. It's so fantastic. And I was thinking, what you were saying about how children will the thing about children is that they're young. That was an obvious thing to say, but we have had, as adults, we've had, way more opportunity to build in the bad habits, the going away from nature, going far too much towards technology. But children are so much fresher and more open, and you give them nature and they go, oh yeah, like this. Mm-hmm. It's like, I mean, the older we get, the more we have to unlearn what we've learned, the habits we've built up that aren't healthy for us. But even when we do those tiny things, I mean, I notice a difference so instantly as soon as I've just gone into my favorite woods, near me. I just notice instantly. And children are rarely dislike going outside. Actually, that's not true. I do remember groaning about going for a walk when I was a kid, but that's probably because the weather was awful and we had to do it. And, that aside, but I do remember going to the seaside and clambering over rocks and, scuttling down onto the beach. And I didn't think twice about it. It just felt fantastic.
It's interesting for the children, because touching on that is actually where I almost feel it can serve them best, is because they've proven too that it puts your brain into the creative thinking mode. So it, triggers that part of your brain, which makes sense, because when they're so entertained by all these other resources that we have, you don't go into that part, right? There's not a lot of even critical thinking, creative thinking, imagination, because we're entertained. So when they get out into nature, not only does it induce it for so many other reasons, but they have that almost blank slate. They have that calming atmosphere that instantly puts them in there. But what's exciting for me to see is that when you're in that state, that is also your problem solving area, right? That is the part that puts your body into a problem. So you're really setting them up for life. And quite literally, if you can't figure something out or can't figure out a solution to something, go out into nature, because it will put you into not only those brain waves, but the part of the brain is ignited where you will come up with creative solutions. You will use your imagination more. You will be able to problem solve where you can't when you're distracted and influenced by other things. So you're building up children's capacity to learn to do that, and so it seems like a silly, simple, quick fix. Oh, go outside and you'll figure it out. But that's really what's happening. And so it's nice for them to be able to see that process. And the one thing I will just say for children that, a parent or a friend taking them out, because it is a transition from the entertainment world we're exposed to. And the one quick fix I find to help them with this is encourage them that every time you go out to simply notice something new that you've never noticed before. And really what it does is all of your senses now are in that moment, right? They're experiencing where you are. And it's it's actually so much fun to watch them because they'll notice things that you've never noticed, or even when you start doing it for yourself, you're like, but you almost have to remind yourself to look, to strategize and try to do that. And then it's a magical world for them out there. We had one program where really young ones, we used to make them walk between two trees, and we'd say, you're entering the magic portal to this environment, and you can be anything you want to be and be anywhere you want to be. You can pretend this forest is in another part of the world and you're doing anything you want to do. And I don't know if it was the doorway or what it was, but the creativity they came up with instantly was amazing. So it's tons of fun to watch them.
That's fantastic. Do you know, out of interest, whether what the brain, you talk about their brain waves change and they go into the creative area. Out of the beta, alpha, what is it? Delta, theta, isn't it?
Yes.
Do you know where it is? I'm just curious. Because gamma's the one which is really when you go into a completely extraordinary space. And this is what I encourage musicians. Don't necessarily talk about it, but that's what we're all aiming for, is just to let go of all the stress and find a way into that. So it sounds as if those children are getting it through their imagination and those portals. That sounds fantastic.
It's true. So what I understand, without being, really well read on all of that, is that it does depend a little bit on what you're doing out in nature, but the concept is that it will accelerate it no matter, what level you're trying to get into. But I think the other interesting thing is they suggest that when you're out in nature, you actually can get into those, higher states and still be moving, which I'm not sure you can necessarily easily do in other environments. And it's on the same vein, and much like meditation, they've also shown that you cause that relaxation, that calming sort of feeling, but you actually boost your energy, right? So we can't really imagine the two happening, but that's often the reference to meditation, is that you're doing that as well. And so you really are doing that by being exposed to nature and still with the possibility of moving. So it's, we can't imagine all three happening at once, but apparently is what is possible when we're out there.
This is not connected to children, but I think it really says a lot about nature and its power. And that was at the end of a music festival here in Oxford, which is where I live in the UK. I got a whole bunch of performers who I know, and we all trekked out in 2 or 3 cars with all these expensive instruments in the back of the car and all this sort of thing. We went to Meadow, which is a very beautiful part of the city, an ancient land which hasn't been built on, and it has wild horses, and it's a floodplain. Actually, it's a floodplain. So when we have a lot of water, there is water there, and it's near the river, it's near the canal. And it's a bit naughty actually, but I just thought, I'm going to take these musicians out there. They've just been hyper, not necessarily stressed, but very up there doing extraordinary things. And I knew I could feel they needed to calm. So I took them out there. This is about midnight. And it happened to be a full moon, so it was particularly beautiful. And all we did was, just leave the cars, and we went to the edge of Meadow in complete dark. We didn't have any lights or anything. So we just had the full moon. And I could feel viscerally, they dropped, you could feel it. It was just amazing. Nobody said anything because they probably weren't consciously aware of it, but on another level, it was amazing. It was just amazing.
It's true. I don't think we think through, what's happening or why it's happening. And so you can imagine that, if we do that every day and bring ourselves down, that, your body, that will become the normal state for our body versus kind of this heightened energy that we have. But yeah, I know when I did the fitness programs outdoors, people would say the same thing, like, instead of kind of being hyped up or feeling drained after a workout, they were so energized, but it wasn't the same as sort of an adrenaline boost energy. It was a very calming energy. And I just think it's very restorative, no matter what issue you're dealing with. It's like your body has the ability to then deal with whatever issue it needs to deal with when you are there and exposed to that. And I think it's a quick solution for us, because sometimes when our minds have gotten away with us, or you're dealing with anxiety, you could talk till you're blue in the face to try and bring yourself out of that, but you literally can't. And the nice thing with nature, it's almost like if you can take your body out there, it's like your body then helps to decrease your mind for you, instead of you in your mind battling your mind, you allow your body to absorb all this physical experience that will then almost send signals up to your mind to relax as well. So it's kind of like working with everything instead of just fighting one part.
So for the children and the parents as well, who are thinking, this is a really good idea, let's remember the importance of nature, and they don't have access to a forest school or your amazing programs, what can they do? What can they do on a sort of daily basis that would really support them? Have you got any suggestions?
I think, there's crazy simple things you can do even indoors, right? Is just set up tables and chairs or whatever that are looking out the windows. Often we don't even, we don't set up our house that way. And even if it's just temporarily, like I used to say, if if it's cold and you're feeling down and you just don't know what to do, then move the chair around and read your book or whatever you're doing, looking out the window versus looking, away from it. As basic as that sounds, but I think it's more reimagining everything we do. Like, can you take lunch outside? Can you work on a school project outdoors? Is there something? Just look at your yard or green spaces around you and find something unique and go hang out there and investigate it more. Feel it, smell it, touch it, try and look it up when you get back home. Just treat it more like something you're trying to figure out, or you're testing. Every day is an adventure. What's the one little thing I can do outdoors that I never thought about doing outside? There's a cool program. I'm not affiliated with them, but they share a lot of stuff. I think it's called 1,000 Hours Outdoors, and it's really children based. It's just social media gathering where ideas are shared and those kind of things. But it's just that idea of trying to and really what they're trying to do is encourage people to set the bar of, calculate 1,000 hours that you spend outdoors. What can you move out there? Maybe if you're even making supper and you can't eat it outdoors, take a few things to mix up and just do it for 10 minutes while you're outdoors. So I think we just have to think. I remember, because coming from Canada, I think we're, the hardiest, we deal with the cold weather, but traveling to Spain, everybody was eating outdoors and under heat lamps. And I came back and I said, shame on us, because even in warmer weathers, we weren't eating outdoors. I was sitting there with my winter jacket on under a heater. And so now we have campfire pits and patio heaters and everything. And everybody will tell you, I've worked outdoors with gloves on my computer just to be out. So some of that's a little extreme, but I think we just have to look at the possibilities with new eyes.
I think that's probably one of the best things that's come out of the last couple of years of the whole crazy COVID scenario. And that is that you know, all that time when we were in lockdown, when it was like the restaurants and the cafes were desperate for business, so they would put everything outside and we'd all freeze and shiver. But actually now what's happened is that as it's all eased, we've got so much more, you know, in the UK, it's noticeable how many more cafes have seating outside, and it's wonderful. And the heat lamps and everything. And I love the idea of the fire pits. Yeah, it's great, isn't it?
It's really awesome. Yes, it's really brought people that qualify themselves as not outdoorsy, that, oh wait, there are perks to this, and I can really enjoy. It's not just about running or exercising outdoors. Sometimes it's just being. And I just say to people, sometimes if all you can do is step out your front step for 10 minutes and take some really deep breaths, when you just don't know what else to do, or even if you have a minute, it will feel good. But, it's even just the air can do so much for us that we just need to consciously take advantage of it every time we can.
Well, I think maybe I'm a big kid at heart, but whenever I go into the woods, I'm always looking out for my favorite tree. Which is a bit crazy because they're all favorites, because they're all so beautiful and unique. But I can just sort of imagine children just saying to a child, okay, so what's your favorite tree? And then they look differently, because you do, don't you? I mean, when you're sort of, they love the favorites, what's my favorite this and favorite that.
Yeah. Well, and there's actually more science on how trees communicate with one another. I don't know if you've ever seen any of that, there's a lot of like symbiotic relationships in nature where one's supporting another, but they've even shown how, if one tree's struggling, that one will be able to send it energy or take less resources from the area, so that one. So they say that the networking and communication with trees is something beyond what we could ever imagine. So that you should also become part of that and have a little chat.
Yes, why not?
I often tell children to, when they notice a tree or one interests them, what would you call it? Like, what name would you give it? And it's so fun because, shockingly, I have one near me that they named Fred, and literally I'm like, it does look like a Fred. I swear. So, but it just, all of a sudden, then you've noticed the character of the tree and the personality of it. So lots of fun stuff you can do. So now you have to go name your favorite tree.
Well, that's the next step, isn't it? Yes, I'll find but for me, they're all favorites. But it does get you looking, as you say, at the uniqueness of these trees. And when I first discovered what you're saying about communication networks with trees, I was absolutely blown away. I had no idea that their roots go underneath the ground and they connect. It's quite mind-blowing. And, there's so much we can learn. There's so much we can learn from nature. I mean, trees are one thing, but the other thing is, about children in nature is animals. Mm-hmm. And learning from animals. And again, another highlight of a very grim couple of years, but one of the highlights was, it was April, or well, maybe it was May 2020, when the woods where I go and walk sort of quite regularly were full of bluebells, which is beautiful in its own right because the scent is so fantastic. But not only that, it was silent. There were no airplanes in the sky. There was nothing. We were just hearing nature in a very different way. And I saw 2 deer. And that, because that woods are they're quite close to a ring road, quite a busy road, but it was so quiet that the deer could come out comfortably and obviously feel safe enough just about. So I basically walked around the whole wood with these 2 deer and taking photographs when I could. And it was just glorious. So, and that's another thing that you see with tiny children, you see with sort of 3-4-year-olds. What's that? They'll chase a squirrel or they'll look at a bird. But then, as they love animals. Children love animals.
And I think a lot of times people feel disappointed if they head out and they don't see an animal, but I think we also need to expose them to the signs and tracking and the potential of seeing those animals, because sometimes that can be as exciting as the actual sighting. And, whether it's seeing a footprint or a track, or even identifying an area where they might be. You might be in tall grass and see where it's all bedded down, and so they know that a deer probably slept there last night. And all of a sudden, the whimsy of imagining the life that's going on when maybe they're not there. But it's so true, because they often say, especially with deer, and how close you get to a wild animal has a lot to do, because they're very sensitive to vibrations, right? So they can sense you even walking on the ground, but also whatever energy you're emitting. And so when you do experience a close-up of a deer and it stays with you, that says a lot about the state you're in, that it can be around you. It's not feeling stress and strong emotion from you. It's feeling very calm and relaxed. So it does feel safe, but that tells you a lot about, how you were and how, what kind of position you were in when you were there. So then it's kind of like they fed you a nice experience, but clearly you fed them as well.
Oh, well, it's lovely when it's real meaning of cooperation, isn't it? And we learn those things from nature. And I was sort of thinking, I just heard somebody talk about birds in formation, and how this is another whole topic altogether. We're talking about leadership, and we don't, the fact that, do we really need top-down leadership anymore in the way that we've had it for so long? And actually, when you look into nature, what you find is birds in formation. Every single bird is a leader, and that is, again, that's mind-blowing. And if children could learn that, actually they know it already. They know it instinctively, or more to the point, if the adults can allow the children to do what they know already, which is be more in sync with nature, sort of understand how the animals and the birds really function, which is huge cooperation, much more than what we were led to believe by Charles Darwin. Survival of the fittest is much more cooperation, isn't it? And
absolutely,
so there's so much our children can learn. And when we as adults get out of the way, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about us all generally, and allow the child to do what is so natural for them and to be more in sync with nature, what impact will that have on them in terms of, their future life as adults? I mean, it could be sort of life-changing.
It's true. And it's interesting, because one of the things I had to battle was, when I was sick, was my beliefs, right? And really the belief of, could I really get better? And so I thought, it's really hard to know when you have beliefs that aren't true, or are true, or are from conditioning, or from, things we've been told and exposed to for so many years. And that's when, as I was referring to before, I went to nature for answers, because I thought the only way to challenge a belief is to see, is that true in nature? Because there was no way to know, and so it's really interesting, because yes, a lot of things children will come up with don't fit our beliefs. But sometimes if we take, an opinion or something a child has, and goes and ask ourselves, is that true in nature? It's quite possible, and most likely possible, that they are actually right in, some fashion. So it's good that we don't dismiss them as much as we do. And we assume that, well, that's just not the way things happen anymore. That's not, our culture, our society. But the truth is, many times, if we look to how it's done in nature, we will actually find not only an easier way to do it, but a more effective and instinctive way to do it.
Something that the children get much more intuitively than we would give them credit for. So I suppose the moral of the story is, not only do we need to get out of our own way as adults and allow ourselves to unlearn what we've built up for all these years, and just kind of learn ourselves from nature, but we just get out of the children's way so they can learn, so they can kind of interact, I suppose, because they're doing so much naturally.
It's true. And I think if we can get them out in nature and keep cultivating, what they have naturally themselves, and we can almost treat them with the same whimsy that we're trying to encourage them to treat nature with.
Yeah.
We may all benefit for sure.
Well, let's just hope that in Canada, in the US, in the UK, and everywhere around the world, that these things become more and more part of our, I hope, new education system, because certainly the education system that is in place at the moment has got a lot of shortcomings and needs a bit of an overhaul, in my personal opinion. Let's just hope that this is a really good way forward and a positive, step forward for children, so that they can be the new leaders of the future. And on that note, I'd just like to say thank you so much for giving your time and or your expertise. It's been so interesting to talk about all these things. I completely agree with everything you're doing. I think it's absolutely brilliant.
Thank you. Well, it was so fun to talk to you about it, because I know even from your book, when I read a lot of the details about it, you use the words adventure and whimsy and magic, and really all of those are nature themselves. So I knew that we were operating on a similar wavelength, pardon the pun, but I really appreciate the opportunity to chat and share some of that with you.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Kristy. Thank you.
Thank you.